Hello and welcome to the latest episode of LP Talks. This time we try something new and dive into the world of video. We have Dan Chapman talking to CEO of the Norfolk Chambers of Commerce, Chris Sargisson. Over to you, Dan.
Hello and welcome to LP Talks once again. This is our first podcast where we are also adding some visuals, so please bear with us, we'll see how that goes. And today's guest, I'm very excited to introduce Chris Sargisson, who is the CEO of Norfolk Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much, Chris.
That's quite right. I'm quite happy being your first bit of video eye candy.
And you're also the first human being that I've had the pleasure of meeting in our lovely boardroom for some while.
So it's a beautiful room, isn't it?
So thanks for coming in. It's Freedom Week. Fair to say most people are a little probably underwhelmed. But we'll come back to that. If I could just begin, Chris, by perhaps introducing yourself, and then I'd like you to tell people a little bit about the Chamber of Commerce in general, from a nationwide perspective, and then particularly from Norfolk's perspective. But my understanding is that in your previous life, you were a business owner, particularly in digital startups, consulting. You've worked in insurance, property, sold a couple of businesses, and then you ended up in a CEO role at Chamber of Commerce in 2017.
Yeah.
Could you perhaps just begin by telling us a bit about what is the Chamber of Commerce, for those that don't know, and,
sure.
and particularly what do we do here in Norfolk?
Okay, absolutely. So the Chamber of Commerce is very simply a business support group. It's one of the oldest groups of its kind. It's been trading in Norwich for, it'll be 125th anniversary in October. And essentially what we're there to do is to understand three particular needs for the business community. One is around their need to connect with other organisations, both locally and globally. The other one is to support businesses as they go through their business journey. And the third one is to provide both a voice out and a voice in. So the voice out is particularly around needs, everything from infrastructure to some of the big ticket items, most recently with digital connectivity, and then also be a voice from government and local authorities, educators, LEPs, all those enabling groups that exist around the business community to talk into the business community. My role as CEO is a 5-year piece of work around modernising and transitioning to enable the Chambers of Commerce to do another 125 years. That would be good. And it's very much based around some of the work that we've done in the past, or I've done in the past, with digital disruption, which is working within existing form structures, where the product is the same and the message is the same, but the audience and the way it's changing and the way that you deliver it is changing.
Yeah.
So, for example, we worked in building one of the first online insurance businesses, which was about not just putting the insurance product online, but actually changing the way that you marketed it, changing the way that you presented it, changing the way that you positioned it, which is why 20 years on you now have meerkats in your life and various other things, which is all to do with that digital transition. So the product's the same, but their route to market and their audience is much more in line and much more enabled and much more transparent. How that works for the Chambers of Commerce? Well, the Chambers of Commerce has, up until very recently, been predominantly a physical entity.
Yes.
So most of what we do, we've done face-to-face.
Yeah.
We've done it through meet-up groups, we've done it through networking, we've done it through conferences. Whereas actually, the majority of the business we represent, I normally have a phone on me, and I go, oh, in here, so imagine a phone in here. And the best way to transition into that space is to understand how you can do things in here. I'm going to pick up my phone because otherwise it's a bit nonsense. How I can do things in here that are different or an enhancement to how you do things physically.
Yeah.
And that is by using data better, by understanding your market better, by understanding the needs and the availability of what you provide and putting it into a digital space.
Yes.
The great thing about a business that's been trading for 125 years, and this is one of the reasons why the role was very attractive. Startups are brilliant because everything starts up at the beginning. You start your culture, you start your product, you chart your market, and you grow. Whereas when you're transitioning a traditional organisation, all those things already exist, and it's how you move them to be more essential. But one of the great things about the Chamber of Commerce, and being a businessman for a number of years, I know how important support is that we just sit underneath this vast collection of connections and knowledge and people and know-how. And if all we do is behave a little bit like a egg timer, which physically you're only able to do, you can only get that information through a grain at a time. So being able to remove, digital gives you the ability to open up that restriction and do things a lot more tailored. So that's the journey that we're on. And going into the COVID pandemic, we were quite well advanced, so we were able to sort of accelerate some of the digital stuff that we've been developing with a sort of purpose around delivering in 5 years to shortening the gap so we could make it land very quickly.
I want to come back to COVID, as you will not be surprised to hear. But in case I forget at the end, let's do a blatant necessary plug. Any businesses that want to join the Chamber of Commerce, how do they do that? Are there any criteria? Can anybody join?
Anybody can join. In fact, one of the first things we did when we started to look at the business 4 years ago, we set ourselves what's often known as a big, hairy, audacious goal. And for those that don't know, hairy, audacious goals are business goals that you set, which at the time of setting you can't achieve them until you've changed the organisation so they become achievable. And our big, hairy, audacious goal is that we want to be able to support every business in Norfolk. Now, every business in Norfolk doesn't mean every business should be a chamber member. Membership gives us the ability to be very hands-on. We have a team of 5 or 6 people on the front line all day, every day, that work very closely with the membership. But any business can have an interaction with us. It's not a closed shop. The best way is to jump on our website or jump on our knowledge channels and just engage with what we're doing. And if there's particular nuances or particular things in there that are of interest, then we can start a dialogue and see how.
So it's really for all sizes there.
Everything. And this is one of the great challenges. I think that the problem sometimes when you have an existing organisation is it tends to get very familiar in what it's doing, and tries to make everything a bit like one size fits all. But we represent everybody from the startup person on the kitchen table for the first time all the way through to the multinationals. So you can't have a one-size-fits-all mentality. It's understanding in that support element of what we do, who are you, what do you need, how can we help? And if we can help and we can and support you just by making connections and links, then that's absolutely what we'll do.
Brilliant. So let's take you back to March 2020. I think
like a therapy session.
I think you said you had a 5-year journey when you started in 2017, and it would be fair to say that you were not expecting a good 18 months of that period to be operating largely in lockdown. So could you talk us through from the Chamber's point of view, from your point of view, how those sort of first few weeks played out, and what did you prioritise, and what did you do first of all? Absolutely.
Well, we faced the challenge in the same way that almost every business did, which is how do I survive whatever's coming, unaware of how long that survival was going to last, and what we were going to do in the interim. Because whilst we are a business support entity, we're also a business.
Yes.
So we were facing the same challenges as pretty much everybody else that we supported in terms of a dramatic drop in revenues, because so much of our income was engineered around events. And also we didn't want to be able to say to anybody, well, we can't help you because you've got financial challenges. So we needed to put any of those sort of conversations on ice. And my approach was a little bit kind of, well, if we're going to go down, we've got to go down screaming, really.
Yes.
This is the time that we are probably the most in need, so we threw everything at it. We didn't furlough anybody, I think with the exception of one particular person who was responsible for managing my diary, which didn't exist anymore. And we put everybody into the front line, and our workforce, we've been going through a transitional program anyway of bringing a very customer-centric team in. So by far and away the majority, in fact probably all of our team were fully prepared and fully skilled at being able to just spend all of their time dealing with inbound inquiries and making outbound calls. So I gave them, I said, there's 3 things I need you to do and nothing more, and that's engage. and let's get you set up where we can, and let's give you what you need, and then just talk to people, find out where they are and what they need, and we can then start to plan from that. And then the other side of the coin was to understand what was coming from government in order to try and filter it. Otherwise it tends to become a space which is very much around, there's lots of information, go figure it out, go and find it out.
Yes.
Whereas what we wanted to do was to take the bits of it that were understood and plonk it in front of the organisations that perhaps didn't have the time to spend doing that research.
Yeah.
So our first approach was to get all of that frontline engagement up and running and make sure we spoke to everybody all day and to keep those lines of communication open. The next thing was around how do we get knowledge into organisations when the traditional means of doing so has now stopped.
Yeah.
And we were already building digital knowledge channels. One is called the Norfolk Knowledge Hub and the other one is called the Norfolk Voice. And that's a really interesting space because all we're doing in those spaces is taking the knowledge that already exists. We haven't got to make it.
Yeah.
It's already being produced, nearly all of it by businesses who are saying, here are the top 5 tips around marketing, here are the top 5 tips around how to survive a recession, here are the top 5 tips around being able to better budget. And they're producing an awful lot of that content through their own LinkedIn accounts.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to do was to try and put it in, like filling up a bathtub, put it into one place. And start to aggregate it, start to join it up.
Yeah.
So unlike an environment like YouTube or an environment like LinkedIn where you're not necessarily sure where you may go next, with the knowledge hubs we can actually curate the knowledge to say, first of all, this is honest and truthful and valid, it's correct, it's accurate, so you don't have to tick that box. And secondly, we can put things into spaces that say, well, while you're here and you're learning about this, and think about this, and think about this, and think about the other.
Yeah.
And those digital knowledge hubs run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as fast as we fill them, fill the bathtubs, the more we can get customers to land in those spaces. The campaign from that point onward has been what we call Knowledge Hour, which I jokingly say is a bit like trying to teach business people that it's okay to watch telly in the day. But actually what they need to do is give themselves and their teams an hour a day to sit down and engage in an environment like a knowledge hub. And not to try and do all of the digital learning while Strictly Come Dancing is on TV on a Sunday night or something like that. To actually start to, almost like a CPD program, to build it into
That's
your
interesting,
day.
yes.
Because without the knowledge hour, then all of this information which is purposeful can't be accessed. Or it's accessed when why would you do that when you're not at work, when it's nothing to do with anything other but work?
Yes.
So starting this marketing campaign and program to educate businesses that it's okay to take an hour out and learn something. Less if you need it, more if you don't. And that's been really helpful because the more information is produced, the more it's curated, the more people land on the knowledge hour, the more we start to deal with the unknowns that trip businesses up. And that's the difference between digital and physical. Physical engagements, people come to you and say, I need this, and we go, that's great, we'll figure it out. But with digital, you discover things because you can't search for something you don't know.
No.
So being able to move very rapidly into that space in a situation like COVID that says, here are the really essential things that you need to know. Every business is free to access. I'm not telling you because I'm being paid to tell you, I'm telling you because I want you to know it. It's been really quite empowering.
Have you found that more businesses have been really seeking help and advice, and that perhaps one of the unintended benefits of this sort of dreadful period is that there's more of a willingness to ask for guidance, to collaborate, to talk to others? Is that something you're seeing?
Yeah, I think what we are, when you get any kind of disruption, it shifts people out of their normal behaviours, and it starts to make you question a number of things that you were probably already thinking. At some point I've got to do X, at some point I've got to understand how I might trade better through digital means, how I might make tax digital, how I might actually go about actually one of the really interesting issues that's coming to the top of the list very quickly is all around how do I go about better greener? What are my climate credentials? So you start to then have a very receptive audience to doing things differently. as opposed to an audience which will potentially engage in a conference, learn something, and then immediately go back to work and carry on doing what they were doing.
Yes.
Because actually that next step is quite hard. But when that next step is actually made for you, I've got to do things differently because that market has shrunk or that situation has changed or it's been changed around me, then that disruption tends to move people on in their thinking and move people on in their organisations into different directions. So in that respect, that shock has been a bit of a moment, and there is positivity to be had from it, and there are struggles and there are challenges to be had from it. The interesting thing though is the majority of the knowledge that we need is there. We just need to find ways of purposing it correctly and getting it into the organisations correctly and continuously. Both at board level all the way down through the organisation as well. So you'll find, I think, now a steady increase. Certainly what we're seeing as well from the inbound inquiries is that, ferociously busy with people wanting to continue with the digital work, but also start to question more physically with smaller groups about particular topics and particular subjects.
Yes.
So what we're seeing from an events point of view is very much around little and often smaller groups with particular purposes meeting quite frequently, as opposed to the older sort of chamber, big and the big breakfast.
So you're starting to see a willingness for people to get out and about at events now.
It's almost like the champagne cork that's about to go bang. The pressure is really building. But of course, we have got to be quite governed by what's possible and what's not possible. And there is quite rightly some organisations that are saying, "Off you go, chaps." Yeah. And there are other organisations saying, "No, I want you to stay back a little bit longer until such time as we feel."
Of course. Well, we try and take a very positive note here on LP Talks, and in that spirit, where do you see, I guess, the next 6 to 12 months for Norwich and Norfolk in particular? How do you see this part of the United Kingdom sort of bouncing back? Do you think we have any particular advantages or perhaps disadvantages?
The recovery programs that we're seeing at the moment that are coming via friends at the LEP and the local authorities is very much around building on some of the real strengths of the region. Around sort of future growth, so that's future growth through the green economy, future growth through the science investment in the science parks, future growth through all of the entities that could start forming around green energy, and trying to establish the region as being a centre of excellence for that sort of key topic. The thing that a lot of people don't think realise that's predominant about Norfolk is that it's the region that puts fuel in the economy. It puts power in the Midlands engine, and we are producing more green energy and more interventions and ideas and knowledge around all of those green aspects in this region than anywhere else. So we're also the one that puts food on the table, so we power the country and we feed it.
Wow.
And what we need to do is to use this experience to really start to connect all of the business organisations into that opportunity, because they will all need elements of what we do in the region as well. And we need to re-establish the region and work as hard as we can to establish the region as being our identifier, because it's critical. If we don't have the power and we don't have the food, then as a country we start to struggle.
Yes.
And I think this region has been seeking that identifier for a long time.
Yes.
It wants to be defined.
Yes.
And I've seen lots of attempts over the years to talk about the East as being something more important than I think people seem to notice it as.
Yeah.
And you can't get more important than green energy and food on the table grown in the correct way. So the more we can start to say, well, it's not just about the organisations that work in that space, it's, well, what does that mean to me? What does that mean to you as an employer, as an organisation, to join up to that message and be part of that campaign? Yeah. It's going to mean more organisations forming, it's going to mean more resources needed with the legal profession and many, many others, because that is the element of the county that's defining itself.
Okay, I want to ask for your thoughts.
That's quite positive as well.
It is
isn't
positive, yeah. We're very happy with that. I fear this next question might be a little less positive. I'm a little worried about some of the high street businesses, some of my clients on the high street. That said, if the streets of the last few days are anything to go by, I think the footfall is on the up. But do you have a lot of concerns about the high street?
I think my main concern about the high street is it goes back to the knowledge. It's got a lot to learn very quickly. It's got to adapt to the quickest, as does the tourism industry as well, and the entertainment industry. There's a very short window to do an awful lot in terms of some of the transition required. And it's making sure that we get all of the support, either the existing support that's in place doesn't dry up, but also future support. For a lot of those organisations that have been kind of running the race that is COVID, of going around the track and using up their resources and using up their energy, actually the bit that they need to sprint to is coming up, and that's when they're going to need the most energy. Yeah. So it's when we've got to be the most supportive. Yes. There is the economist's argument around the breakup of the sort of bigger chains and how long has that been a threat, and how COVID has accelerated that. But by far and away, the majority of retail, the shopping experience, when it's more of an individual experience, is the experience that people seek. Yes. And I think there's a lot more that we can do to reduce the costs for organisations being in the high street, to smarten up the supply chains, to get some of the digital interventions in that will mean that they can trade both from the premises and from the stock room, and speed up some of those programs whilst being supportive and protective of the legacy that they're going to have for a while, which is a long period of surviving and not trading and not putting profits into the bank for rainy days.
Okay, so linked to the high streets, a topic that as an employment lawyer I'm getting a lot of clients asking me about at the moment, particularly in Freedom Week, is the extent to which workplaces will have their staff back in offices. And I see this as an issue perhaps in London more than around here, but there's whole industries, tailors, coffee shops, that are based around the offices. And there are also industries, obviously, in Norwich likewise. I have a sort of a personal view on this topic, but where do you sit in the whole working from home, back to the office, once it's safe to do so? Do you think that the world has changed irrevocably? And
It's certainly changed, but I think there's the fact that we've been in this position for quite a while now, I think means the novelty is worn off for them. And working from home for many who would have traditionally been in a place of work is not ideal. Yes. But there's times that there's benefits to it which can be worked into the new norm, as is explained. Absolutely. I mean, the big thing really is the health and well-being of the people that you work with, and most employers put that paramount. Yeah. And it's not about supervision per se. It's about making sure that your employee is well looked after and has the resources they need and the understanding they need. So much of work is done through conversations that happen in the workplace on a day-to-day basis, rather than the task itself, and that's impossible to mirror when you're at a kitchen table and there are other demands on your time. But what I think we'll see, and what we're starting to see, is this hybrid, where you're actually able to empower more around choice about the times that you work and the elements of the business, where you work in the business, who you work with, that the sort of routine element of things then starts to be much more in the hands of the employee, to be able to say, I want to be here today and there tomorrow and there the next day and the next, and be much more transient, because actually the technology has been demonstrated that you can do that. Yeah. So don't just work from one place because you can, work from a number of places because you can.
And in a way that is beneficial for the business as well as for the employee. Yes. Flexibility
is key. So I think we'll see lots of ideas and experiments and creativity around how that's going to take shape, which will be predominantly led by the desire from the employer to make sure that they're doing the best they can for their team, and the desire for the employee to be able to balance their work life and their home life and the time that they need to be able to do some things in a quiet environment, and other times. So there's all of that is now up for reimagining and redoing, as opposed to, they're going to be back there where you were before and nothing has changed, or you're going to be at the kitchen table and struggling with all the other bits and bobs that go on.
So I believe the Chamber of Commerce yourselves have recently taken on a new office, new premises.
Yeah.
So was there a part of you during the last 18 months that thought, let's not do that, let's save some money, we could all work from our homes? Did you even consider that as an option?
Well, actually, the first thing I did when I walked through the door of my office 4 years ago was say I'd like to leave this place. So
not the entire business, just the
No, that's not the type of business. Because actually what it represented was an element of the business that we needed to change. So the transition for us was very much around becoming a customer engaged organisation. And that is what we do. Peel away just one layer of the onion. We are a customer engagement organisation, and we had an environment that the customers didn't come to.
Yeah.
And if you are a member of a Chamber of Commerce, I want to be talking to you, I want to be engaged with you on your terms rather than just ours. So we've been waiting for the break clause to come up in our lease in order for us to find places within the towns we represent and the area we represent. We're not the Norwich Chamber of Commerce, we're the Norfolk Chambers of Commerce. So we wanted to find spaces that we could occupy, that we could create business hubs in.
Yeah.
It's not a place for us to work from, and we didn't know what was coming, but it was making the workforce more customer engaging, more mobile, so their only choice 4 years ago was working from a desktop on a desk 9 to 5. All of that's changed. Big investment in technology, big investment in people, so we can be anywhere. And what I wanted to be able to do is to create very effective business hubs for every business in Norfolk, which has an element of events, training, a cafe, breakout spaces, hub, hot desking.
Yeah.
So we're part of the business community because we're providing those services as well.
Yeah.
So our first one is in Norwich, and we're very, very lucky to be working with Create Consulting, who own the building that we're in, which is the old, depending how far back in time you go, it started as a bank, then it became a post office, then it was Anglia TV, then it was Savills.
Yeah.
So it looks boarded up at the moment, but we are in there.
Oh yes, lovely. Yeah.
So and we're putting the planning applications in now to create the cafe and the event space. And then we're talking to our friends in Great Yarmouth and in Kings Lynn and in Thetford.
You want to open a few of these
to sort of create these spaces that we can work from and people can work with us. And so we're back into the community rather than being in a very functional office. There's nothing wrong with it, but it was acquired for a particular purpose 20 years ago, and things have moved on.
Yes.
So it feels good to be out of there at this particular moment in time, and all the plans are coming to fruition.
Yes.
And we're very excited about getting it done and opening our doors and welcoming people in.
Excellent. Okay, just a couple of more things, if I may, Chris, before I'll let you go. One of the things that we at Leave Spire have really focused on, particularly during the tougher days of lockdown, is our culture. Everybody talks about culture, but I don't think for many businesses, until they hit really tough times, they actually genuinely sat down and thought, what do we stand for? Mm-hmm. What is our culture? And I think I'm seeing a lot more people really wanting to dial into that now and going forwards. Really to say to their customers, their people, this is what we stand for as a business. Is that something that the Chamber endorses? Do you see that as the future for many businesses? Yeah,
and I think throughout my career, setting the right cultural narrative in an organisation is fundamental to anything you want to achieve. And I guess depending slightly on the services that you provide, the majority of cultural narrative is going to be based around an end user or customer. Yeah. So it has to be based very much around the culture that you set in an organisation is ultimately destined for the person who's going to be receiving it, and then everything is backfilled from there.
Yeah.
And therefore, the cultural narrative that the owners of the business or the caretakers of the business set means that whatever the behaviours within the organisation, the customer gets the full benefit of it.
Yeah.
So we start seeing a lot more of that particularly in the pandemic, where the customer's narrative has become very much the most important thing. That behaviours that may have been resident, that were very much towards what the business wanted to do, have had to go out the window. And actually you reset your narrative, your cultural narrative, because your customer is in need of things that they won't need, but they won't wait or they can't do those things. You need to transition, need to change. So if the narrative is very much around the customer and in whatever shape that customer is, you've then got the skill of the business to empower all the people in the organisation, to adhere to that narrative.
Yeah.
If you get bits of that wrong, if you get areas of it which are at the feel that they don't need to be part of it, that's somebody else's job, then the wheels start to come off a bit.
Yeah.
If you don't get an environment where you are able to very openly share transparently things that are going well and the things that need improving, then you become blind to some of the challenges that you need to be facing, and then you're not. But the cultural narrative is not one that's overly autocratic. It's one that's very much shared and the values of the business. And the more recruiting becomes a challenge for businesses, which it will. It's not just about pay. It's about the environment and the ability to participate.
Yes.
And your cultural narrative, going back to the green agenda, is becoming more apparent. If you haven't got within your narrative an element of how your behaviour is impacting on climate, and your competitor has, then when it comes to people choosing which organisation they work with, or even which organisation they buy from, then
in that latter case, we've certainly seen, and we've been pushing it here, a real desire from a lot of consumers to want to get behind local businesses.
Yes.
Feeling that perhaps the local businesses are those that most need their support, rather than perhaps some of the global corporations who may or may not pay tax in this country. And actually there's nothing wrong with that, but it's something that I guess the Chamber is pretty keen to encourage as well, is let's help each other.
Yes, and it's very much at the heart and the core of what we've done and are doing. And there's a number of good reasons to do it, which from an environmental point of view are helpful. If you can shorten supply chains, that in itself is positive. But actually it's about enabling businesses to articulate much more around who they are and what they do, so they can be seen.
Yeah. And
I think Norfolk has had a bit of a challenge over the years about businesses being able to communicate who they are and what they do. We do see because of the way that it's kind of laid out, the landscape is laid out. You know, there's a sort of disconnect sometimes.
Yes.
And often you feel that the people that you seek aren't necessarily on your doorstep, and it's hard to find out whether they are. And this is another reason why I think what we do needs to be much better and fundamental in saying the solutions to whatever you need are on your doorstep, and look at it first. Chamber it, don't Google it.
Yeah.
You know, create a directory and let's make sure that everybody...
Chamber it, don't Google it. That's a great one. Chris, I'm just going to end, if I may, by taking you back to one of your former lives. You set up and sold the very successful House Revolution business. As a law firm, we've been extremely busy working in the property market in the last few months, principally because of the stamp duty concessions. But it's a big part of our business, and a lot of our clients are always asking us, and we don't know the answer, so I'm really interested in your views. What do you think is going to happen to the property market in I guess this area in particular, but perhaps maybe nationally? What's your view as an expert in that?
We need another podcast on that one. That's quite a big question. It's a tricky one. I mean, the solution, I think, to a lot of it is that we need to build more affordable homes, without question. I think one of the problems, one of the challenges, we can't have problems, we have to have challenges now. One of the challenges that we have, particularly in the first-time buyer market, happened a while ago, where people who didn't who had money came into a space that normally was destined for people who were always struggling. For the first house that you buy is always the struggle.
Yeah.
But if people are buying second homes, third homes, and they're starting to offset it with their pensions and investment, then that's pushing the prices up, and then it makes things unaffordable. And that's started to skew that end of the market, and it starts to exclude. And the more you exclude, the more you end up in a position of almost elitism or exceptional behaviour. We've got to level that off. I think the process. I mean, one of the reasons that we created House Revolution was two reasons why we created House Revolution. One is because it's very expensive; it doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
Making it affordable across the board is something which I think is achievable, and that's affordable by sensible pricing and the reduction of waste by people becoming pulled into deals and spending money on things which actually, if they were perhaps given the information at the start, they would have thought differently about it. Yeah. So there's a financial waste in there which is still to be resolved. Yeah. And secondly, there is still a digital transformation that can happen in the property space, which hasn't happened because the majority of the people involved in it don't want it to happen.
Of course, yes.
Because if it happens, then their market becomes disrupted.
I'm sure you were deeply unpopular at times.
I was far from popular, and that then creates the sort of challenge that the market has, which is it's a space that people tend to go through and come out unhappy at the end. Yeah. If you can figure out the triggers for the unhappiness, then actually you're in the position to change it in such a way that it becomes more affordable and a better experience. Yeah. So that's hence the word revolution. We chose the word revolution because it has the word love in the middle, which sounds a bit cheesy, but we kind of wanted to create something along the lines of it's now okay to love your estate agent because it's got you through the transaction in an affordable way. But there's a number of things that need to change, I think, within that industry, which is still predominantly unregulated, that starts to set things out, which will, to a number of people, be a horrific comment. But it remains relatively controlled by the process, and actually what we need to do is to get some real innovation in there to start disrupting it a bit better.
Chris, I understand you're a musician. You like to sing and gig. Yes. So are you looking forward to getting back out on the music scene? That's a sector that's been hit hard.
We are the most rehearsed band ever.
And for those who don't know, interesting fact about Chris, he played in a band with James Bond or Daniel Craig, whoever.
We did. I did. I was at school with Danny Craig, and he and I had a falling out on the last day of school over a microphone.
I bet you regret that falling out.
No. And then I find that he's there playing the role that I was naturally born to play.
Oh, of course.
It's not gone down well.
It could have been you. Chris, thank you for coming along, giving up your time. You're a busy man. I can tell from your phone that lots of people need your help and guidance. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
So that was Chris Sargisson from the Norfolk Chambers of Commerce speaking to Dan Chapman about all things local business. Thank you to Chris for coming to see us. It's so nice to see people in our office again. That just about wraps it up for this episode of LP Talks. Thank you all for listening and have a great day.